Hello to everyone. I'm so happy that Smartling invited me to present to some of you. And what we're going to be covering today is actually one of my favorite topics, actually. And it's about promoting the value of localization on the enterprise side of the business and generating a higher profile so that you can obtain a seat at a lot of these tables that you need to be at. So my name is Rebecca Ray, and I'm with CSA Research, and we're an independent research firm. I know many of you are know who we are, but in case you don't, been around for more than 20 years. We've got 6 analysts now. We just hired someone new. We're focused on international 24/7, and that could be language, it could be the infrastructure that backs things up, it could be your international expansion goals. So anything that has to do with global, that's what we research. So let's talk about how we get all of you to a little bit higher level so that you can keep international revenue going and keep your international customers happy. All right. So we're going to talk about 3 things today. Why it is your seat at some of these tables, and we'll talk about the types of tables and the types of seats, how to take that seat, and then how to keep it. But first, there is one thing. For you to really be able to take some of the advice and I think be successful with it that I'm going to be sharing with you, you need an executive sponsor, a champion, whatever you call that at your company. You need someone to back you up at those meetings where you are not in because your job title maybe isn't high enough, and someone who has your back to really help you gain the support you need for the initiatives and for what you're trying to do. So if you don't have an executive sponsor and don't know how to get one, contact me after this presentation. We can help you do that. You really need that to be able to be successful in localization. So why do we think that there really are seats for localization at the table, even though there may not be a C-level? Oftentimes there is no C-level executive. Let's talk about that. So some of you are going to go, right, Rebecca, we've been down this road before. We've done our best. Sometimes we get, up to a certain point and then there'll be a new VP who will join. We have to do this all the time. And yes, you do. It's ongoing. It's never a battle that's totally won. You need to always be sure that you're in the places where you need to be. But we really believe that you've got a golden ticket now at this point. And the opportunity is because of AI, Gen AI, machine learning, whatever flavors your company is working with. It really does provide a way for you to get back into these discussions or to be involved in them the first time. So what the research that we've been doing, really, Gen AI or even machine learning, is really akin to global digital transformation on steroids. I'm sure many of you in the audience have been involved in digital transformation initiatives over the last few years, whether they've gone well internationally or not. I'm sure many of you know what I'm talking about. But the AI part is even much faster, right? Because the tools are changing, because there's so much investment, there's push to use it, and people who used to have to come to you for translation, for example, or for help on things, think they could do it on their own. But I will share with you why we think localization teams are in the catbird seat. I should explain, I guess. Catbird seat, I think, is actually an American English idiom. I don't think it came over the ocean, so to speak, from England. And it basically a term that means catbirds tend to sit very high in trees and observe what's going on. So being in a catbird seat means that you're in an advantageous position, that you're more apt to see the whole picture and be able to influence what's going on. And why are you in the catbird seat when it comes to AI? It's because your team owns and oversees at least part, if not most or not all, of the content, code, data, whatever images are going into these engines that are feeding AI in general. You're sitting on a ton of data that's needed for markets outside of your home market. And second, which a lot of your, I shouldn't say a lot, we'll just say many executives and many of your colleagues may not understand, is you do have the expertise or can develop the expertise to address the weaknesses in the English-centric, Anglophone biased, algorithms and the engines themselves. And that's really important because even the ones coming out of other countries now, whether it's China, whether it's France, are going to come with biases because that's the nature of what this technology is. So don't be bashful. The people at your company implementing any flavor of AI actually need your expertise. And if you feel that you or your team isn't strong enough, come talk to me. We'll help you develop that expertise or show you that you're actually smarter than you think you are. So be confident because you have a lot of information and expertise that the teams need at your company. So how do you take that seat? Once you're convinced that you have expertise and that people need you, how do you get a seat? First, we might need to talk about what the tables might look like, so to speak. So some tables will already be full, right? And people aren't necessarily getting up and making room. The second kind that we've seen are, yes, there could be a room at the table, but it's a very, difficult group to work with. Hopefully for many of you, it will be a table where actually there is a room for a seat for you. And I should also say, when we're talking about tables, what we're referring here to, it could be a Gen AI initiative. It could be another kind of initiative at the company. It could be something important that you're working on with another team, say customer support or procurement, for example, a large project, not a project, but really an initiative that's going to require either support or will affect other teams in the company. So these are the kinds of things that you need to be looking for to figure out, okay, what's happening at the company? What do I need to be aware of with my team, and how can we contribute? And it could be that it's like a steering committee. So various companies, within, depending on what stage they're at and what vertical they're in, will call these different things and organize in different ways. But basically, it will be a collection of people who are making strategic decisions around AI or around something that, as I said, will affect a lot of people in the company. So we encourage you to leverage the opportunity. So there may not be a seat at the table for localization, but there certainly should be a seat in some of these tables for global customer experience and for customer experience in general. And no initiative, very, that we can think of almost always comes without some type of content, right? Whether it's a program that's being implemented, whether it is in terms of customer service or marketing, whether it's a promotion, whether it is a product itself. So almost all of it's going to have some kind of component that carries data or content that needs to be localized in some way. And global customer experience is what your team does as localization. And no, you're not responsible for the entire experience or the entire journey, but certainly without the language component and the cultural expertise that you bring and your knowledge of how language works in these language models is something that people in the rest of the company are going to need as they implement this. So I've already referred more than once to an enterprise-wide initiative. So you need to know the top 2 or 3 and who's driving them at your company. And they may change over the year, but generally most companies, whether public or private, or even if you're a nonprofit organization or an NGO or something, there are going to be things that you're going to be focused on for the year. So figure out what those are. And if you're not sure what they are, go to your executive sponsor. If you don't have an executive sponsor, you can go to finance because they're going to know what the company is focused on. And that's what I want to talk about next is if you don't have an executive sponsor or even if you do and you want sort of a different perspective on things, finance can really help you in these areas in terms of at a strategic level to know what groups are, who's driving them, because they basically know what executives expect and how they're being measured and how the rest of the company is being measured, right? Because it all ties into the money that they're responsible for. So you can benefit from really valuable expertise because they're involved in a lot of things. They can also help you frame your own data or find extra data that you might need to support what you're either an idea that you're trying to convince people for, an investment to make around AI, and they can tell you sort of who the players are. And it doesn't mean that you need to be talking to the CFO, the chief financial officer. I know that most of us these days, aren't in the home office. We're not in the same building. We're not in the same city or country as the home office or where the, locus of power is going to be. So, find someone within finance, even if it's someone at a lower level, explain to them what you're doing and cultivate them so that you can get insights if you need them from this business function. And that way will be keyed into a lot more. At the same time, you need to be identifying possible people who may support you or block you, or people who are just undecided or don't really know what you're up to. So this actually takes a strategy. So even if you are on a table already, create your hit your hit list, so to speak, in terms of, where people sort of sit on the major things that you want to promote, or the value of your team, or whatever it is. And it's really important to approach anyone who you think might be against or uncommitted, because those are the people who can really help you solidify your arguments and actually better understand how people are looking at your team and what you're trying to accomplish. And so, just repeating this again, executives in general usually land in three categories when you're talking to them about something. And that'll be people who are already supporting you, people who are like, yep, no, we don't need to do this, don't have money to do it, don't come knocking on my door. And the people, as I said, who are undecided, or who just generally don't know and aren't aware, but that you believe they should be aware. So, again, if you're not sure who some of those people are, and you don't necessarily have an executive to go to ask, then again, someone in finance, someone in even in business intelligence, someone in PR, actually, oftentimes in your press area will know, if you're a larger company, what's going on, because they do so much writing with executives, and again, sort of like finance, tend to have sort of a bigger view over what the company's doing. As always, with whatever you're doing, you need to align, what you're doing with corporate goals, and the KPIs, key performance indicators. So again, what your company's focused on now and over the next 12 months, and how your team's expertise, whether you're focused on Gen AI or something else, how is it going to help them get there? And then you can use that to wiggle your way into the tables. And then I think we all know this these days, but just a reminder that then you need to make sure that what you're presenting has data to back it up. You translate it into, numbers and data. Upper managers, we find more often than not, still maybe more on the US side perhaps, but still making comments about, oh, I wish I'd taken a language, or oh my goodness, I wish I lived in another country. And anytime you hear that little bell goes off, it just means, okay, steer to the bigger issues, usually with people like that. And instead of using terminology such as turnaround time or more languages, talk more about time to market and about expanding coverage and those kinds of things. And if you're not sure about what this data, or even what terminology to use, again, finance, business intelligence, even people in sales can help you with all of this. And then, of course, visualize for your audience, because executives, especially and upper managers, tend and are paid to be strategic. Some of them do want to get down into details, but most will not. They do want you to make them aware of whatever challenges or blockers you may have, but not at a detailed level usually. So you need to help them picture the trends with data and graphics, and again, business, market research, all of those people, business intelligence, even design people can help you with this. And if you're doing some kind of a proposal to people at the table, or maybe working on a big initiative, do a trial run and see if you can get people who haven't been so supportive to give you 15 or 20 minutes to take a look at what you're doing, and make sure that you tell them, really, please critique my narrative. Even if you decide never to support what I'm doing, could you help point out where some of the weaknesses are, so that I can bolster what's there and address their concerns? And then you'll be in a lot better shape once you go before whoever you need to. And even if it's not a big proposal or a big initiative or a budget proposal, even if it's an elevator pitch that you're kind of working on, like 2 sentences that you and your team can use with everyone to really explain your value, run that by people who you might think know nothing about what you're doing, to see if anything registers on their face when you do it, or whether you're sort of getting back, a glassy-eyed stare, and you're not communicating with them, because most people will try to help you if you ask. So once you've got one of these seats, how do you keep it? Because it is an ongoing thing. You don't just get the seat and keep it. And of course, these tables will change and morph and go on to, other things. One of the things obviously relates to what I just mentioned is being able to speak in terms that other people around the table are familiar with. So speaking business ease with ease at the table. So here's some of the words, depending on who your audience is, that you may want to start to sprinkle around your vocabulary and use them in proper ways. Big thing that we're hearing right now is a lot around risk, partially because of AI and just partially because of what's going on in the world in general. TAM for any, or TAM for any of those who may not know, it's total addressable market. So tending to use more of these words on the left as compared to ones on the right, where you might be talking about cost and quality is a favorite one. Your word counts and that kind of stuff. Make sure that you're couching those in terms that people that actually apply to what they're thinking about. For sure. I think you all will get a copy of the slides. And if you don't, you can reach out to me directly, but you'll see on some of these slides that we've got some references at the bottom that will provide more input if you're interested in them. So let's take an example of a table where Gen AI decisions might be made and some of the things you might do around there. One of the way to expand your team's mission around all of this would be to think about, okay, what ideas or processes can my team contribute to stakeholders or to enterprise-wide groups that are trying to grow their global business, that are trying to infuse AI into it? How can we really help them with their part of the global support system so that you attract and maintain even more customers than you are now? One of the things is we suggest is that you don't wait. If you haven't already done so, really look at who's really doing innovation in your organization. And it could have to do with AI, it could have to do with processes, whatever it might be. So anyone who's designing anything, and it could be a product, it could be a process, it could be a program. Those are people you might want to reach out to. Product managers, if you have them at your company, are a great source because they have to look out at the entire environment, figure out, okay, what kind of features, how will this generate revenue? How will it affect the company? All those kinds of things. So they're really good people to go to. And even people working on accessibility. I know it's especially the US press is having a hard time, but still it's a big one in a lot of companies to figure out, even if it's not associated to anything like diversity or equity, still we've got to make this stuff accessible to customers through language, through the experience that it gives them. So that's a really big one where your team obviously can be of help. And there are a lot of Gen AI tools that are actually helpful in that area. And they've got to be able to cover other languages and cultures, right? One of the things that we're finding that actually helps is, okay, if you're still somewhat in the beginning stages with AI as a company, or you're watching your company make some really serious, or what you consider to be serious mistakes, or even little mistakes, send an email to a CEO or someone driving an initiative and say, hey, we can help you define what you're doing at a multilingual, multicultural level. It could be the usage policy, it could be a specific initiative that you're working on, but to make sure that people realize, oh, this team translates, but they also can do all of this other, or help us with all of these other areas that we're struggling with. One of the things too is to continue pushing, if you happen to be a company that can do that, to really push people who are working on large language models or GPT stuff, any suppliers, to really globalize, work on continuing to globalize their algorithms and training data, and to show them how to do that. Because just as a reminder, I wanted to show you a let me bring it back here. I wanted to show you a breakdown really of what languages still look like. So when you look at the blue and the red here, the red is still English in terms of what is coming out, say, on the internet. And these percentages, even though this is data from May 23, we've taken a look at, haven't changed a whole lot since then. And this part, Europe takes care of most of the languages in Europe, take a big part of that. And then you've got the rest of the world over here, including Chinese. So again, this affects models, obviously, in terms of language, in terms of how they're designed. So keep this in your back pocket when people are wondering why, maybe it's not as important as they think it should be to actually look at some of these models and analyze them. The other thing is to collect use cases and train your IT internal developers. It could be content developers as well, on multilingual. What is required in these large language models that they are probably developing or have developed for your company to use inside. Because I don't have time to go over all of this, obviously, right now, but I want to bring this up just to remind people how much is involved when you're taking a look at language, and especially any kind of model that you're trying, to integrate that language into. And especially as we move more and more to speech, which is happening more and more, and certainly will in countries where the languages are less resourced, there's going to be a lot more dependence on speech than there is on the written word. So there's a lot of areas in these models that you can actually support developers in, and they need to know that you're available to do that. And again, don't be concerned if you don't know everything about this. I mean, nobody knows everything about everything, right? So what's important though is to make sure that teams understand that they can come to you and go, oh, even if your team doesn't understand, you have ways to find out and to help them design and actually implement these engines and how they're being used in different environments. And so when you get the chance, educate those innovators I was talking about on the previous slide with any of this, so that they begin to feel more comfortable with this and actually don't need you, hopefully, as much in the future as they might right now. So while you're doing this in the background, keep showing everyone the money, right? If you can. Don't be asking for funding or a higher budget to cover the cost. What you want people to be thinking of course, is in terms of investment. And a lot of companies are investing in AI now, and being multilingual with it is one piece of it. So try not to use the words like cost and spend and pay for and fund, in English or whatever, language that you're using. Rather, that your mantra should be that language is a revenue enabler and not a cost. And if revenue enablement doesn't really resonate at your company, that's fine. Just talk to someone in finance and say, here's the issue, here's the value, this is what we want to pivot people from thinking about what we're doing so much as a cost, and to really show what we're doing as an investment, especially when it comes to AI. And finance people should be able to help you couch it in terms that people within your organization will feel comfortable with. One of the things that may work, whether you're sitting at a table or working on a big project with another part of the company, is to double team with a function. In other words, co-present or work with them on an international challenge that they may have. Your upper managers are always going to feel positively when they see either silos or different business functions collaborating. And obviously, the power in number, your arguments can carry more weight. So, for example, again, if engineering or even legal or HR, procurement, any of the functions within marketing, customer support, certainly, will have international challenges, whether they're working or trying to address them or not. So again, reach out, find out what theirs are, and then take it from there to see if there's stuff that you can work on together. We recommend when you can, to assign a memorable name to what you're doing, whether it's something at one of these tables, so to speak, or if it's another initiative that you're working on with another business function, because it makes it easier for people in management and executives to remember. It's also easier to track the status of what you're contributing. If someone can say, oh, multilingual popcorn. I mean, that's silly, but just a short 2 to 3 word name that you can use for what your team is working on would be great. Then people can refer to it, and you can bring it up and explain it. And then you own the success, because in people's mind, it's like, oh yeah, the localization team did a great job with this, or they're helping us get over a big hump that we've been working on. And all of this is meant to increase visibility, again, for language as the revenue enabler that it really is. So at the same time, when you're doing work, even if it's just your own team and it's perhaps simply an AI pilot that you're working on, remember that other colleagues within your organization may need help with their international objectives, because it really does combine with yours in one way, even though you think it didn't. or won't. Remember that support at the strategic level will come from executives, but the actual support for execution will usually almost always come from some other team or some other manager or some other VP. So if there's an investment involved, whether it's in terms of time or other resource or money that you could help another team with, great, whether it's their own international project or the one that you've been working on and you all of a sudden realize, this is going to affect customer support. We need to be working with them. And even just as in the past, some localization teams used to assign a localization or globalization champion within critical functions, such as customer support or engineering or development. It can be the same with a multilingual AI champion or someone who would be available to field those questions. And once you kind of get the word out that you can be, come to for that expertise, it should make it easier to make your way onto a table and to stay on that table. So I know we've had to race through this, but here are 9 ways that we think you can use to take and keep your seat, whatever form that seat may take. So one is to get help from finance if you need it. Make sure that you've got your executive a champion, but if you don't, finance should be able to help you figure some of this stuff out. Then identify people who you think we're going to support, who may block you, who may be undecided. That could be at an executive level. It could be more to mid-level director level, whatever those are for what you're working on. Make sure what you're doing at the table or off the table is aligning with corporate goals and key performance indicators or KPIs. You always want to do that, and corporate goals will change even within a year. So you need to kind of stay up to date with that. Translate what you're doing, what you're trying to accomplish, or the new idea that you brought to the table into numbers and data, and then visualize it for your audience. And there'll be people who can help you with that if you need it. And AI these days will actually help you quite a bit. Huge assistance in terms of translating what you're trying to do into something visual. Do a trial run when you can, and then double team or triple team with other functions if you've got initiatives on the international side, which all, the various teams could really be achieve more combining rather than just going individually. And then when you need to, support your peers to meet their international objectives, whether it's related to what you're trying to do at one of these tables or whether it's simply one of their own objectives. And then we didn't have a separate slide on this, but stay on message. I think is pretty obvious, but again, develop a 2 to 3 word or 2 to 3 sentence thing to describe what your team is doing in terms of the value that it adds. And the more you do that, the more you may be invited to some of these tables. One warning before we finish up, someone else will take your seat or maybe already has it if you haven't gotten to it. So just remember, it takes a strategy. It's an ongoing issue. It's not just about promoting your team. It's identifying some of these tables, or at least one of them that you need to be at, and then making sure that you get there. And we understand that it's not easy. We know that it takes time and it takes effort, and it will take you away from some of the daily operational tasks. But in the end, usually it's almost always worth the time, especially as you gain more visibilities and more visibility and people actually recognize what you can do. So for any of you who want to read more, again, if you get a copy of the slides here, they are. We can give you help recruiting executive sponsors, how to engage, and people from Smartling can also help you with many of these same topics. So make sure that you go to them as well. And then reach out to us at Common Sense Advisory anytime if you want to. And there's my email up there, Rebecca at CSA-research.com. And again, reach out to us or Smartling, and we're more than happy to help you because we're so passionate about all of the stuff that has to do with global and international. So again, thank you very much for inviting me to present. And I will sign off for now. Bye.